Welcome to How Do They Afford That, the podcast that peeks into the financial lives of everyday Australians. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a writer and co-host of the Fear and Greed Business News podcast. And as always, I'm with Canna Campbell, financial planner, founder of Sugar Mama TV, the financial literacy platform that has pretty much taken over the internet. I'm going to say you're bigger than Google now. You're on YouTube and Instagram and podcasts and books and everything. So good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Look, I'm going okay. Thank you. I'm looking forward to today's episode because it is a topic I don't know a huge amount about, except for all the rumours and the scandals and all of the intrigue around it. We're going to be talking about multi-level marketing schemes and kind of things like your Tupperware and all of those ones, and whether you can actually make money from them. Because you hear some fantastic success stories, and I want to know whether it's actually legit. But first, have you got a savings hack for us? Something that will save us a bit of money?
I do, okay? You may laugh at this, but it actually is quite a handy one, particularly at the moment with purse strings tighter than they've ever been before. So apparently, we only need 1 tablespoon of washing powder in our washing machines. But if you look at the instructions, they tell you a scoop, and that scoop is 3, sometimes 4 tablespoons of washing powder. We are wasting money, literally washing it down the drain pipes.
Okay, how do you know this? How did you figure this out? Were you just doing a bit of trial and error, testing? Today I'm going to do a teaspoon of washing powder. Tomorrow I'm going to do a whole tub full and just kind of see what gets the clothes cleaner.
I went down a bit of a rabbit warren. I started researching this as to how much we really need, because I've had this theory for a long time that these, they're sort of all in cahoots with each other, where we're told to use X amount of product per wash. Now, in fact, as I said, we only need 1/3, which is literally 1 tablespoon. And in fact, we're actually not only wasting money, we're obviously damaging the planet, but it's also really bad for our washing machines because it creates a buildup of soap scum and creates biofilm in our pipes. So give it a go and let me know how you go. And the one thing is I've noticed in doing this, my clothes actually feel cleaner. You know when you sometimes wash your clothes and they come out feeling a little bit chalky? Mm-hmm. That's excessive use of washing powder.
And if I can add my own little tip in, and it's actually one that we have talked about before, and that is the best laundry powder that I have found, and it is the Coles Ultra Concentrate Laundry Powder, and it is
Frangipani. Don't forget it's Frangipani.
Is it?
I believe so, yeah.
Oh, I genuinely don't sniff it. I wouldn't know.
I would hope not.
But it's and it's cheap, and it has received the official kind of seal of approval from my mother-in-law, who's done a lot of washing, and she has tested many of them, probably even more than you have, and has ruled this one is the best.
I've converted. I used to always think that we needed to get the Omomatic front loader, sensitive washing powder, which is excellent, but it is expensive, and I have converted and it is outstanding. And I will also point out, I have received so many DMs from people on Instagram asking me, can I please send a screenshot of that washing powder?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And whenever you do that, are you crediting me? Are you saying here's what Michael uses? You're not.
I do. Well, they obviously know because they've heard the episode where we talk about this washing powder.
You are claiming this hack as your own.
No,
this is
never.
Outrageous.
But now we're taking that savings of using the Coles washing powder one step further, because you now know not to use the scoop, but to use 1 tablespoon, which is approximately 1/3 of the recommended use. So you're going to get, so much more mileage out of that box of washing powder.
I don't actually mind you using my tip. I have claimed so many of your hacks and your ideas throughout the course of this podcast as my own. I'm starting to sound like a bit of a genius when I'm talking to people, and I'm happy to go along with that and just let people think it's all me. All right, let's get into it. We are talking about multi-level marketing schemes. We probably all know somebody who has dabbled in this, and look, there's a lot of hype. There's on occasion some bad publicity about these things, but today I want to know kind of how they actually work. Can you actually make money from them? But before we kind of get into the details of all of that, what are some examples? What are some examples of brands that operate as multi-level marketing programs?
All right, so there is Herbalife, which is dietary supplements, protein powders, meal replacements, weight loss solutions and supplements.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Amway, which is very similar to Avon, and they both sell like beauty, fashion, home care. Then there's New Skin, which is skinwear. There's obviously the famous Tupperware, which is obviously stocked in many kitchens around Australia. And then there's doTERRA, which is essential oils. But I didn't realize this, it's a $180 billion industry worldwide. Multi-level marketing schemes.
Really?
Yeah. Isn't that incredible?
That is huge. I mean, because the originals would really be your kind of Tupperware. And Avon has been around forever.
And so is Amway as well.
That's a good point. And doTERRA seems like a more recent kind of addition, but it is everywhere.
I get hit up with a lot of people on Facebook sending me DMs trying to upscale me, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Oh, trying to recruit you?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, I can't wait to hear how that goes. How does it actually then work? So we all know those brands. We know Tupperware, we know Avon, we know doTERRA. How is that actually a multi-level marketing scheme? What does that actually mean?
So what happens is these companies use people rather than direct retail outlets to sell their products. So when these particular people make a sale, they collect commission for that sale, and then they can obviously recruit people along the way.
Okay, we'll get into the structure in a sec. How much of the money do you actually get to keep for yourself? If you're the representative selling on behalf of this brand, because obviously they don't need a shop. They don't need to pay for a location in a mall or in a shopping centre or something. They've got people out there selling for it. How much of that do you then get to keep?
It really varies from brand to brand and the actual underlying products. So they have a variety of different levels of commission that you might earn. However, most of them have a tiered commission structure, which means the more you sell, the bigger the commission gets. So when you hit a certain number of sales or you've hit a certain sort of threshold, you then get a bigger commission as to what you did previously. So it is a great or very clever incentive for the company to have to really make sure that their sales team are really working as hard as possible.
Okay, so you are keeping a part of the sale, that is your commission, and that seems a fairly kind of straightforward thing. I think everyone understands how the commission would work on if you're selling something, you're keeping X% of the sale or the profit on that. But where multi-level marketing is different is that you can recruit other people to sell, not just really on your behalf, but they are essentially operating downline from you within the organization. And am I right in saying that if then someone sells something and they are one of your downline people, you also get a cut of their sale?
Correct.
Oh, okay. And that is essentially then how there is an incentive to try and recruit other people, because if you've suddenly got 5 people or 10 people all selling on your behalf and you're taking a little bit of their sales as well as selling your own, that is how you can build it into an income.
Exactly. And it can be, for some people who have a great team of people working for them, it can be quite profitable.
Okay, well, that is the big question then, is can you actually make a decent living out of this? Or does it rely on you having a big network of people working downline for you? Is poor kind of Johnny on the end being only kind of selling to his family and his friends? Is he not going to make enough money to get by? And I know these are all kind of hypotheticals. We don't know Johnny and we don't know what he's selling and we don't know how many family and friends he has. But can you actually make a decent living out of this?
Well, it really depends on your definition of what a decent living is. So you've got to think about that. But look, there have been a lot of investigations into multi-level marketing schemes. And according to Gerard Brody, the CEO of the Consumer Action Law Centre, he says that approximately 99% of the recruits will actually lose money. And this was also something that was similar was discovered by the SBS The Feed and the US experts. So you really got to look into the details and do a lot of research before you jump in, because it's expensive sometimes to get into, and also it can take a huge amount of time before you actually start seeing money coming in the door.
We need to go through some of those downsides, because this is where then sometimes the controversy comes from. But one more question before we kind of get into it. Are you actually an employee of the company, or do you need an ABN? Are you a sole trader? Kind of what is the structure here? I'm just trying to get a very clear idea of who this kind of arrangement suits. And also, if you are an employee of, say, Avon or of Tupperware, you are in a very different situation to if you are self-employed in terms of your leave and your superannuation and all of those kinds of things. There's a lot in that, wasn't there?
You pretty much just answered your own question, but yes, you are not an employee. You're an independent contractor. So that means you need to do your own taxes. It means you don't have any annual leave or sick leave. And you also have to work out your own superannuation as well. So there is a lot to consider, which is why a lot of people shy away from this, because they don't like that lack of security and stability in their lives. And because you are an independent contractor, depending on how much money you are making, you may have to register for an ABN. And typically speaking, once you start earning $75,000 or more, you must have, it's compulsory to have an ABN. But you need to remember you are not an employee, you're an independent contractor.
Okay, which actually does come with a lot of additional considerations. And so it's not something that you should really just rush into, is it?
Look, a lot of people do this as a side hustle. So they'll have their 9-to-5 jobs and they use this as a bit of extra spending money on the side, and they'll do it on their weekends or early in the morning or, in the evening.
So is that kind of how we should be thinking about this? That this is not necessarily something that you're going to quit your day job to go and do. You're not going to go out and sell essential oils. You're not going to sell Tupperware containers to essentially replace your 9-to-5 and know that you're going to have enough money to pay your mortgage and pay your rent, that kind of thing. That it is almost a supplementary kind of thing. It is a side hustle, something just to bring in a bit of extra cash potentially.
Look, it can be whatever you want it to be.
Oh, goodness me.
But I do know people who have actually had their 9-to-5 jobs, done this on the side, and then what the technical term these days is they've cushioned their way. So they've done their 9-to-5, and as soon as their, multi-level marketing scheme job brought in enough money that they could afford to quit their full-time job, they then leaped. So they bounce between the two in the short term with obviously a vision to quit their full-time job and do this full-time. And it has worked for some people. I personally know people who have done that successfully.
Okay. And if you want to do it, I imagine there's a lot of research that you would need to do.
Huge.
Yeah. And it would be a case of talking to people, but be careful about talking to people who are currently doing it, because guaranteed they will try and then recruit you into doing the same one that they are. But there's a lot of information online about the various programs, and it is worth reading about it.
Reading reviews as well.
Oh, yeah.
But also looking into the costs, because some of these actually require you to make an initial investment up front.
All right.
To be able to be a part of these programs. So you've also got to consider the opportunity cost if you don't have that money, and some people will go and borrow money to do that, which then obviously increases their risks. Some of these programs have quotas.
Okay, there's a fair few downsides, things that we want to kind of unpack here, probably things that you need to be aware of, the risks here. We've so far talked about the upside, which is the flexibility of it, the fact that you can do it alongside another job, the fact that it probably gives a little bit more exposure to people. It allows you to use your network. It allows you to kind of get out there and talk to people. So it's probably going to have appeal to a certain number of people. There are a lot of risks and a lot of things you need to consider. We will come back in a moment and go through a few of those. All right, Canna, we're talking about multi-level marketing. So things like Tupperware and doTERRA and Avon and Herbalife and all of those kinds of ones that we hear a lot about. And especially if you're on any kind of social media, you are going to get hammered by people talking about them and inviting you perhaps to a party to sniff essential oils. I'm assuming that's what happens at these parties, or to see which kind of Tupperware containers keep things the freshest. It is, as we discussed, something that can provide additional income, but there are some things that you need to be aware of. So let's get into those ones. You mentioned before the risk of actually having to pay money up front, which actually I'm going to say seems a little bit odd to me. If you were kind of working or going for a job with someone, it doesn't seem very common or very usual to have to actually pay money to have the opportunity to do a job. But what are we talking about here? Are you buying stock? Are you kind of buying into a market? Do you kind of get a guaranteed kind of patch that's yours then? What's the point of this money?
Look, it really does vary depending on what the underlying product is. But sometimes that starter kit is actual equipment that you need to be able to do your job. So you might be, for example, buying the demonstration model that you will use in front of people to show how the product works. Or you might have to pay for the products up front, which you then go and sell. So there are so many different ways of actually structuring this and doing this. This is why you need to really do your research. And also you want to make sure that you pick a product that you're actually passionate about. You know, I don't think I'd be particularly passionate about selling Tupperware, but if I was selling makeup, that might be something I'm more passionate about, and I might be more successful in that league. So you don't want to just look at the bottom line. You also want to make sure that you pick something that you actually have a genuine interest and passion in.
Do you have quotas that you need to make? And are there, I suppose the next question is, are there penalties if you don't hit them?
It's so interesting you say that. So again, it does range from brand to brand and how they structure things for you. But I have heard of people having these quotas and they get so overwhelmed and so stressed. And there's actually documentaries out there about this where they actually end up buying all of their products themselves so that they meet their quota just to get rid of the stress and pressure, which then obviously backfires and defeats the whole purpose of doing this in the first place.
There's also a social aspect to it, isn't it? And there's a social risk as well of alienating people. That if you are a consultant for a particular brand and suddenly your friends know that every time you see them, that they are going to be hit up to either become a consultant downline as well, or that you are going to be asked to buy products, then there's a chance that you are not going to get invited to many places anymore.
That's true. And you know what? It's a lot more advanced these days. There's a lot of social media marketing as well that goes on. I get hit with so many messages on Instagram from these multi-level marketing scheme people, and they're always trying to recruit me to become one of their downliners. And, you know, it's also more, I'm starting to see more and more on Instagram as well. And look, these multi-level marketing schemes are very sophisticated. You know, as I said, they're $180 billion industry.
Wow.
So they are ahead of the game. We're just observing what they're doing. And they will get influencers with huge followings becoming part of their affiliate program. Actually, this morning I even got a message on Instagram from they make baby products, asking me if I will become an ambassador. And when I actually looked into the message, I could see it was actually a multi-level marketing scheme.
Oh, wow. So it can kind of hide in plain sight, really. It looks like just a normal business. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these structures, but you just need to be aware that you are essentially perhaps signing on to something that you weren't aware of at first. Another thing is that there's a risk of kind of being sucked in a little bit, lured in by what appears to be quite flashy. I know of a couple of people who Facebook was always filled with them heading off to conferences and trips to pretty kind of glamorous locations, and it was all as part of one of these schemes. And they were a legitimate consultant, and they were clearly quite a successful one. They must have had a fair kind of number of downline kind of recruits selling on their behalf as well, because they were always off to these fantastic places and holidays that were paid for by the company. And seeing that, you would go, I want that. You could very easily be lured in by that.
Well, that's part of the glamorous life that they paint, working just a couple of hours a day and making all this money and being able to work anywhere in the world. And you can literally be sitting on a beach in Tahiti, collecting revenue from your downliners. So they're very clever in their own marketing to recruit money. And as we have explored, that's how a lot of them actually make money with their downliners. So you've got to be very, very careful what you're looking at. And when I was doing my research for this particular episode, I went down a rabbit warren and I found all these stories of people who'd been putting huge amounts of hours and they were making, a couple of $100 a month. Now, don't get me wrong, a couple $100 a month is helpful, particularly in an economic climate that we're all struggling with right now. But when they actually sat down and looked at how many hours they were putting in each week, they were earning sort of like $7 an hour. And you look at that and think, well, I could maybe go and work in a cafe, or, I could look at upskilling my own skill set and apply for a new job, or, there's other things you could potentially do with your time that's potentially more efficient. And
you could walk dogs, you could do babysitting kind of thing. There are a lot of things where essentially the hourly rate would be higher than that, but you would be potentially drawn in by what appears to be a very flash structure and some pretty nice incentives that appear to be on offer.
And as I explained with the person who I know reasonably well, who did cushion her way from her full-time 9-to-5 job into becoming a full-time multi-level marketing person, and it took her a couple of years before she was able to make that leap. So sometimes it does involve a large amount of time up front, short-term pain for long-term gain. So this is why you really got to sit down and do your research.
Okay. I want to do a bit of a checklist in a minute of research, that when you are sitting down to do this, the things that you should be checking on a website. Before we do that, pyramid schemes. It's something that you hear a lot about, and I think there's a bit of confusion perhaps around what is a pyramid scheme and what is a multi-level marketing program or scheme. When does multi-level marketing become a pyramid scheme?
It becomes a pyramid scheme when you start selling a membership. However, pyramid schemes are banned in Australia.
Okay, so essentially that you are not selling a product, you are selling
a membership
to that company.
Exactly.
All right, so there's actually no tangible thing that is being exchanged.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So, well, that seems quite clear. That actually seems like a fairly straightforward approach, but as long as there is a product, whether it is Tupperware or whether it's kind of makeup or essential oils, that it falls into that category of multi-level marketing. Okay, assuming now you've decided, I want to be potentially involved in this, what should I be looking out for? When you sit down to research, perhaps you've been recruited by or approached by someone who wants you to be one of their downliners, what should you be looking for? Let's do a bit of a checklist.
All right, the fine print, quotas, startup costs, how much time, read as many reviews as you possibly can, talk to, if you can, find people who used to work for the business. There are so many forums online, it's actually quite incredible. The amount of information, as I said, I went down an absolute rabbit warren. How long, realistically, will it take before you actually start making money? What is the actual underlying product? Is there a genuine need? And is it something that you are interested in? And it's something that you genuinely use? Because people are pretty switched on and intuitive. They can tell when you're just a salesperson that you don't actually have skin in the game and you're passionate about that product. I think that's why people who do this full-time really embrace the brand and the philosophy and the mantra and ethos of that particular product. Then, of course, you need to look at the time that you're putting into this, and whether you actually have that time available to be able to give this the best and biggest opportunity to, work for you and to come into fruition financially for you. Also thinking about the emotional side and the social side, are you going to alienate people around you? Is it going to actually come with a lot of long-term loneliness if you're, pushing people away from your, sales pressures? Also, some people need to have a look and think, well, am I good at sales? Do I actually have a experience with sales?
That is a good point, because some people just are not good at selling things. And this is essentially a sales job, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's why people really need to just think before they jump and not get caught up in the very glamorous, marketing schemes that you and I have both seen of people, at these conferences, traveling around the world. And to a certain degree, I'm seeing a lot of this on social media, like talking about how they only worked 3 hours this week or this month and they brought in this much thousands of dollars. So, I look at the ongoing costs.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they may have earned that much money, but also what was their ongoing expenses for that as well. So, yeah, eyes wide open, guys.
What about exiting? Can there, say you decide it's not for you, can there be a cost to get yourself out of it? Unsold stock, all that kind of thing? Maybe if you haven't reached your quotas. I feel like I'm being very kind of pessimistic about this, but I think it also needs to be realistic.
Absolutely. Again, this is why you've got to read the fine print, because they will have all those terms and conditions listed there. So you know exactly what you're getting yourself into and what you're getting yourself out of. And also in that fine print, just checking that there's no exclusivity. So they may have, say, a 3-month clause where you're not allowed to go and work for a competitor, for example. So you've got to make sure that you understand everything.
That is a good list. That is a great list. We've covered a bit today, and really it's a look behind the scenes of multi-level marketing, because we hear about them, we hear about those brands, but until you kind of get an understanding, or until you're approached by someone wanting to sell you some Tupperware, you don't really kind of know how they work. But we're talking about brands like Avon and Herbalife and Amway and Tupperware and doTERRA, brands that everybody kind of does know, and they're selling actual products. And that is the key difference here between multi-level marketing and between a pyramid scheme, where a pyramid scheme is selling a membership, and that is banned in Australia, whereas this is actually selling a product. It works by using a tiered structure where you can have people selling downline from you. You recruit people, and then they are essentially part of your team. And so that you're receiving a commission for everything that they sell, you're receiving commission on what you sell as well yourself. And that all kind of goes upline. And you can see how then it becomes, by definition, a multi-level marketing scheme. How much you keep of the money depends on the actual product and depends on the fine print, which is all something that you should be looking at before you get into it. You are not an employee of the company. So it's an important thing to remember that you are essentially an independent contractor, which means you need to take into account to be thinking about your tax and your leave and the fact that you don't have sick leave and annual leave, and be thinking about your superannuation as well, because this is not something that the company is going to do for you. You need to be responsible for that yourself. As to whether or not you can make a decent living out of it, it is, as you say, Canna, probably something that is very, very subjective. Depends on what your circumstances are, depends on how long you've been doing it, how many people are selling downline from you, how successful you are as a salesperson. But it may be something that is suited perhaps more to someone looking to supplement their income, perhaps working alongside, or mums and dads juggling kids and wanting to kind of bring in a little bit of extra money on the side, that maybe that is kind of more who would be looking at this kind of scheme up front. The downsides, they vary obviously between kind of company to company, but there are some significant risks here, and that is where a lot of people can actually find themselves losing money. That if there is a cost to buying into this program, if they need to buy starter kits or demonstration models, or even a payment towards the stock that they are then going to be carrying, that is actual money that they are going to have to hand over and then earn a fair amount of commission in order to be profitable. You may have quotas you need to make, and it is something that you need to figure out if you've got the time for. So that checklist, I'm going to do this checklist in kind of record time. If you are considering doing a multi-level marketing scheme, if you're thinking about getting involved in multi-level marketing, the things you need to check are the fine print. That covers everything from the actual terms of what you're selling, how long you need to be doing it for, the exclusivity afterwards, whether there's quotas, how much you actually need to be selling, what the startup costs are, how much you need to be paying at the beginning just to get involved in the program, how much time is going to be involved, how much time you need to be available, be able to commit to it every week, and also how long is it going to be before that scheme is actually profitable for you? How long are you going to have to work at this before you start seeing some return on your investment and your effort? The ongoing expenses, is it going to cost you money every week or every month? Do you need to keep buying more stock? Are you actually passionate? These are questions for you personally then that you're not going to find in the fine print. Are you passionate about the product? Is it something that you actually want to get out there and sell? And are you passionate about sales? Can you do it? Can you actually get out there and sell to people? And are you going to do social damage to yourself if you're selling to your family and your friends, if Christmas lunch suddenly becomes a big sales party and you just trying to not let people out of your house until they've actually signed up to buy something? I've talked for about 2.5 minutes straight without taking a breath. I think we've covered that fairly well. What do you reckon?
Outstanding.
Any notes for today? It feels like normally whenever I do a summary, there is something that I've missed.
No, I feel like you've nailed it.
Well, it's fairly comprehensive, isn't it? All right. Now, if anyone wants to kind of get in touch with you, probably not to kind of hit you up about joining a multi-level marketing scheme. But
you'll get a flat no from me. No thanks, but no thanks.
But if they have other questions about anything that we talk about here on the podcast, where do they find you?
The fastest place to get in contact with me directly is actually through Instagram at Sugar Mama TV or at Canna Campbell Official. Otherwise, you can tune into my Monday morning podcast on Sugar Mama's Fireplay.
Excellent. And you can hear me every day with Sean Aylmer on Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. Thank you very much for listening to How Do They Afford That? Remember to hit follow on the podcast. Please leave us a review as well. A 5-star rating is always greatly appreciated. Next week, we are talking about what to do if you are a low-income earner but want to get ahead. There is a lot to explore in that one. It'll be a great episode. Don't miss it.